Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to learn how to receive and handle WhatsApp messages with Node.js using webhooks. If you didn't watch our previous video on how to integrate the official WhatsApp API with Node.js, I really encourage you to watch that one first, where we learn how to send text messages, send and upload media files, what is and how to generate message templates, generate a permanent token, and many other features that we're going to use in this video. So make sure to watch that video first if you're not familiar with the WhatsApp API yet, and then come back to this one. I'll leave the link on the description below. So to use the WhatsApp API on our Node.js application, you'll need a Facebook account and then configure a new application on the Facebook developers platform. So you can visit developers.facebook.com and click on login on the top right. On the login page, you can create a new Facebook account if you don't have one yet by clicking on Create New Account. Since I already have an account, I'll click on Login with Facebook. So I'll log with one of my personal accounts here. Okay, after logging in, we can click on My Apps on the top right. If this is the first time you're logging in the Facebook developers platform, it might show something else here, like Get Started or Create App. Make sure to click on that option. On the apps page, let's create a new app by clicking on the Create App here on the top right, or here on the center as well, either one is fine. Now on the Create App page, let's give a name to our app. So I'll add WA, which stands for WhatsApp, _ app. And we can add another email here in case Facebook needs to contact us about our created app, but I'll leave the one associated to my account. And click on Next. On the app use cases, we can select the other option here on the bottom. As you can see, it has WhatsApp here on the description, and click on Next. On the app type, we can select the business option and click on Next. Okay, if all details are correct, we can click on Create App here. Okay, now we need to add products to our app. Since we're going to use WhatsApp, we can click on Setup on the WhatsApp product. Now, before we continue, note that there is a message here saying that WhatsApp will generate a test phone number so we can use to send and receive messages, and we can only send to 5 phone numbers that we're going to add. But this is just during development mode, so we can test to make sure everything is working before going live. Once the app is in live mode, we can send to any phone number we like and use our personal phone number. Okay, we can click on Continue. Perfect, app is created. We can see here on the top left the name of our app. Now we can click on Start using the API. So on the API setup page, I'll just walk through the details here very quick. So the first thing, we need to generate an access token that we need to pass in every request inside our Node.js application. So we can click on Generate Access Token. It will show this dialog to confirm your authentication. So I'll click on Continue. And we can leave the option Opt-in to current WhatsApp accounts only and select the Test WhatsApp Business Account option, because we're going to use only the WhatsApp test account that the platform generated for us. And click on Continue. And then click on Save. And last, on Got It. And perfect, here's the access token that we'll need to store securely in our project. And here's the test phone number that WhatsApp generated for us. So we're going to use this number to send and receive messages. And on the To field, here's where we need to add up to 5 phone numbers so we can test. Note that I already added a phone number here from Brazil, but you can add or remove test phone numbers by clicking on Manage Phone Number List. And here on the top, we're in development mode, but once you go live, you can add your own phone number by going here on step number 5 and click on Add Phone Number. And also you need to add a payment method by clicking on Add Payment Method on step number 6. And then after setting these configurations, Facebook will review your details and it might ask for a few extra details, so it might take a few days for everything to be completed. Okay, so we are ready to use the WhatsApp API to send messages, and you can check an example here of the request. So if we select the test phone number here from the drop-down, note that the example changed it to send a message to the number we selected. And it's sending a type of message which is called template. We're not going to view the differences between a normal message to a template message, but know that if we need to start a conversation with a user, we can only send pre-approved template messages. On the previous video, I explained how to create a template message, how to add variables to a template message, and many other features. On this video, we're going to focus on how to receive and handle messages on our Node.js project. And to enable that, we need to configure something called Webhook. Before we start coding, let's understand what is a webhook and how does the WhatsApp API webhook works. Webhooks are a way for one system to send real-time data or notifications to another system automatically. It's like an event listener where one service sends an HTTP request to a URL in another service when something happens. Imagine this. The WhatsApp server is waiting for events to happen, like a user sending a message to our company's phone number. When that happens, WhatsApp needs to inform our application. To do this, we need to configure a URL in our backend where WhatsApp can send the event data. So when a message is received, WhatsApp will call this URL and our application will process the incoming information right away. So we need to configure this URL on our WhatsApp app on the Facebook developers platform. To do so, on the API setup page, we can scroll to the step number 3, configure webhooks to receive messages, and click on the configure webhooks link. Now on the configuration page, on the callback URL field, is where we can enter the post URL that WhatsApp will call whenever a new message is sent to our test number, and it's the URL we need to create on our backend Node application. And note that there is a verified token field here. This token is a security measure used to verify that the webhook URL we provided is legitimate, and we can enter whatever we want here. This is like a password. So we need to create 2 endpoints on our backend, a GET endpoint that is used by WhatsApp to verify our webhook URL. It checks the verified token we provided and expects on the response a code back, which is called challenge. And we're going to see soon how this works. And another post endpoint with the same name that is used by WhatsApp to send event data, that means incoming messages, and whenever we send a message, WhatsApp will return the status of the message we sent. If it was delivered, read by the user, or if it failed somehow. So let's check the docs here to see how to configure the GET endpoint to verify our webhook URL. So let's click on docs on the top bar, and I will open on a new tab. And under app integrations, let's click on webhooks. And on the webhooks from Meta, we can click on getting started on the left menu. So when WhatsApp calls our webhook get endpoint, it will send 3 parameters on the URL, which is the hub.mode, and this value will always be set to subscribe. The hub.challenge, which is an integer value, and we need to send back to WhatsApp as a response. And last, the hub.verified token, which is the token we set on the verified token field. So inside our webhook get endpoint, we need to add these validations here. Verify that the hub.verified token value matches the string we sent in the verified token field that we entered, and then send back a response with the hub.challenge value. Okay, so let's configure our webhook get endpoint. So here on the webhook configuration page, on the callback URL field, we can't send something like localhost 3000 because localhost only works on our local machine. It's not accessible from the internet. Instead, we need to provide a public accessible URL like a real domain, the URL where our application is stored on a server or a cloud, so WhatsApp can call. There are a few options we can use to test this on our local environment, like running a tool called ngrok, which creates a secure temporary public URL that tunnels to our local machine, or instead of writing our code in the traditional VS Code, we can use an online IDE platform that lets us write, run, and share code directly in our browser. And some of these platforms offers a public URL that makes it great for testing webhooks. There are a few platforms out there that we can use, like glitch.com, codesandbox.io, but for this video we're going to use a platform called Replit. So let me open a new tab here on the browser, and I'll type replit.com. Replit is, like I said before, an online platform that we can write code, run, and deploy in various programming languages. There's a free option here, so if we click on the pricing here on the top, You can see that there's a free plan that we can use, but it has some limitations. Unfortunately, it only lasts for 20 hours. After that, you would have to buy a plan. But since this is just for learning purposes and the main focus here is receiving WhatsApp messages with webhooks, that's perfectly fine. So let's go back to the home page. And to get started, we need to create an account. So we can click on the login link on the top right. And to create an account, we can click on sign up link here on the bottom. Once you enter your email and password, then you can click on create account. Then it will send an email with a link so you can verify the account. Once you verify, you can log in and it will ask for some other personal details like name and why are you using Replit, and then the plan where you can choose the starter plan, which is the free plan. Since I already have an account, I'll click on login and I'll enter my credentials here. Okay, so this is like the dashboard and we can tell AI prompt what kind of app we want to create, or we can choose down here to create a Python or a Node.js app. So I'll click on create Node.js and here we can add a title to our application. So I'll add something like WhatsApp, Webhooks, and click on create REPL. Okay, our Node.js project is created. We can close this AI assistant here because we're not going to use it. And we can open the files explorer here on the top left. So we have an index.js file, which is our main file, and a package.json file containing our app details and the dependencies. And note that there's only the node types installed here. So let's install the dependencies we'll be using on the terminal. And to open the terminal, we can click on All Tools button here on the left and click on the Shell option. Okay, so here's the terminal tab on the top right, so we can install our dependencies. So I'll type npm install, and we're going to use Express to create and organize our routes like the webhooks get and post route. And to call the WhatsApp API endpoints to send text messages and interactive messages, we'll need a library to make HTTP requests. And we can use Axios for this. Okay, press enter. Great, dependencies installed, and we can check here on our package.json file under the dependencies object. Now here on the index.js file, I'll start by importing the dependencies we just installed, and I'll start with Express. So const express equals to require, and inside express. Now let's import Axios. So const Axios equals to require Axios. Now we need to initialize Express, and note that Replit has a code completion here, assuming that we'll initialize Express. So let me accept this autocomplete because this is how we initialize Express, creating a constant, usually called app, which is equals to Express function. But let's disable this code completion by clicking on the All Tools options on the left and select the user settings. Now on the user settings tab, look for the option called AI code completion and disable this option. Okay, we can close the user settings tab. Now back on the code, we need to tell Express to accept JSON type requests, because when WhatsApp send the message details sent from the users on the webhook route, it will send as a JSON type. So below here, I'll call the app constant .use method, and inside I'll call express dependency .json method. Okay, now we need to tell Express to listen our application on a specific port. So I'll call app.listen method, and the first parameter is the port number, so we can use port 3000. And the second parameter is a callback function, so if the server is created, we can write a message on the console. So I'll add an arrow function here, and inside console.log with the message server started on port 3000. Now let's test all this, and to run our app, we can open the shell tab here and type node index.js or just index and hit enter. Okay, note that it opened a web view tab here calling a home route, but we didn't create any routes yet, so this is why it's showing this error cannot get slash, which is like the home route. And here on the shell tab, it shows the message on the console server started on port 3000, just like we added here on the listen callback function. Now let's create the home route just to test. So below the express JSON configuration here, I'll call the app constant.get. And the name of this route, I'll just add a slash here, which is the home route. And then a function that receives the request and response parameters. So request is everything that the client will send to us. And the response is what we need to send back to the client. So inside this route, let's send a simple message as a response to the client. So we can call the response parameter .send method with a simple message saying WhatsApp with Node.js and Webhooks, for example. Now we could stop the server here on the shell tab by pressing Ctrl+C and run again node index command. Or another way to run our app is by clicking on the run button here on the top. So when we do that, note that it also showed the web view tab, and now it shows the WhatsApp with Node.js and Webhooks message that we're sending to the client when calling the home route. And it also shows here the console tab, showing everything we wrote in the console, like the server started on port 3000 message, and the shell tab here is free to use. So it's up to you how you want to run your application on Replit. The good thing about clicking on the run button is that the console is separate from the terminal itself. Now the main reason why we're using Replit Online IDE instead of using VS Code on our local environment is that Replit generates a public URL. So here on the web view tab, note that the URL here has replit.dev domain. So if we click here, this is the public URL that will test the WhatsApp webhook. So if we copy this URL here, and let me open a new tab and paste, note that it called the home route and shows the message WhatsApp with Node.js and webhooks. So now we have a public domain. Awesome. Let me close here. Now we can create the webhook get route to configure inside the WhatsApp platform and to validate our webhook configuration. Let me stop our app by clicking on the stop button here on the top. Okay. Now let's create this new route below the get home route. So app dot, and this will be a get route, and let's call this slash webhook, and then the request and response parameters, arrow function. So according to the documentation, WhatsApp will call this API and send data on the query parameters. So let's print on the console the parameters so we can check. So I'll type console.log, and to get the parameters, we can call the request parameter .query. And let's just send a response so the app doesn't stay hanging. So response.send method. Okay, let's run this by clicking on the run button on the top. Okay, app running. Let me copy our public URL here again and open the WhatsApp platform tab. So here on the webhook configuration page, on the callback URL input, let me paste the URL here and add the webhook here on the end, which is the route we just created. Now on the verified token input, we can add anything we want here. So I'll add something like my-verify-token. And we can click on verify and save. Okay, so we got an error back saying the callback URL or verified token couldn't be validated. That's because we're just printing the data WhatsApp is sending when calling this URL. So back here on Replit, let me open the console tab. And here it is. We received the hub.mode equals to subscribe, hub.challenge, and this is what we need to send back on the response, and the hub.verified token, which is the token we configure. Great. So inside the webhook get route, we need to grab each of these parameters here and add a few validations. Let me delete this code from here. And first, let's grab the query parameters. So I'll add a new constant here called mode to grab the hub.mode parameter here. So I'll call the request parameter dot query, and inside square brackets, I'll add the hub.mode parameter. Now let's grab the challenge query parameter. So const challenge equals to request.query, the square brackets, and inside hub.challenge. And last, the verified token. So const token equals to the request parameter dot query, square brackets, and inside the hub.verify underscore token. Okay, now we need to verify if the token WhatsApp is sending matches with the token we configure on the platform. So let's add a new constant here on the top so we can make it global. Below the Axios dependency import, so const, and we'll call this webhook underscore verify underscore token. Usually I like to create these global variables all in uppercase, but it's up to you. And this one is equals to the verified token we configure. So let me copy here from the WhatsApp platform and paste inside here. So now we can use this constant in every route if we need. And since this is just for learning purposes, we can configure this constant directly here on the index.js file. But in a real application, it's a good practice to store this token and all other tokens inside an environment variable file using something like .env. So back on the webhook get route, let's add some configurations here, like checking if the mode parameter is being sent and if the token parameter is equals to the webhook verified token constant we just added. So I'll add an if statement here, and I'll check if the mode constant exists and contains a value. So we can leave it like this because JavaScript is already validating if it's not undefined and not null. And I'll add an AND operator here and check if the token constant is equals to the webhook verified token constant we just declared. Okay, if these conditions are valid, we need to send the challenge parameter back as a response. So I'll call the response parameter dot, and let's send a status here with the 200 status code, which means okay. So it's a success response, and the dot send method, and inside the challenge constant. Now I'll add an else statement here. So if the mode is not there or the token is not equals to the webhook verified token constant, then we can send a forbidden status code back as a response. So I'll call the response parameter dot, and we can use the send status method, which sets the status code and send the response automatically, instead of adding the status property and call the send method. And inside here we'll send the 403 status code, which means forbidden. Great, let's run our app again. Okay, now on the WhatsApp platform tab, let's click on verify and save again. Perfect. If these webhook fields options showed here, that means our webhook route is validated. And these are all objects we can get notified by WhatsApp when something happened, but the most important here is the messages object. So let's subscribe to receive notifications about the messages by toggling on the right option here. Okay, we are subscribed to the messages webhook field, and we can create the webhook post route that WhatsApp will send message data to our application. So back on the Replit platform tab, so we need to create a post route with the exact name we added here on the get route. So below this route, I'll call app.post, and the name has to be /webhook as well. These two routes must have the same name. And then the request and response parameters, arrow function, and inside, WhatsApp will send the data on the request body on a JSON format. This is why we configure the express JSON middleware here on the top. So let's print on the console what WhatsApp will send when we receive a new message from a user. So I'll type console.log, and inside the request parameter, .body property. But I'll convert this to a string by wrapping this inside a JSON.stringify method. And I'll add some parameters here to format the response instead of showing everything in one line. So new for the second parameter, which is the replacer, and 2 for the space parameter to add an indentation of 2 spaces. Okay, and let's send a response back to the client so the request doesn't keep hanging. So I'll call the response parameter dot status with the 200 OK status code, just like we added here on the get route, and then dot send method. And let's add a message here saying webhook processed, for example. Great, let's restart our app. Okay, let me open the console tab here. And let me mirror my cell phone screen with WhatsApp open so we can test. Okay, so here's the WhatsApp, and the number that is configured is the number we configure on WhatsApp setup page. So if I click on the options button here on the top and select the settings option and click on the username here. So here's the number configured, and if we open the WhatsApp platform tab and select the API setup option on the left, let me select the test number on the drop down, and as you can see, it's the same number that is configured on the WhatsApp app. And let me go back here. We're gonna send the messages to the test number WhatsApp generated for us. As you can see, it's the same number from here. Okay? Now let me open a conversation here with the test number and put the phone screen to the right. And let me open the Reply tab. And I'll resize the browser so we can see the code and the phone screen at the same time. Close the file explorer. Now let's send a message here to our WhatsApp test number. So I'll type something like, hello, this is a test message, and click on send. Great, this is what we received on the post webhook route. So we got an object with the object property, which will always be WhatsApp business account, and then an entry array with the changes array inside. And what we'll need here is the messages array inside the value, which contains an object with the from property, which is the number who is sending the message, the ID of the message, the timestamp, and the message inside the text object and the body property. Every message we'll receive, it will have this structure here. The entry array with the changes array inside, and the value object with the messages array inside, which will contain just one object with the message details. Now, before we handle all this inside our webhook post route, let's send a message to this number so we can see what we'll receive back. Because WhatsApp will inform the status of the message we sent. If it was sent, if it was read, or if it failed somehow. So here on the code, let me resize the browser, and below the webhook post route, I'll create a new function to send a text message to responder user. Note that since the user already sent a message to us, we can send back a normal text message. If we want to start a conversation with the user, we have to send a template message, which I explain in depth on the video where you can find the link on the description below. So below here, I'll create a new async function, call send message, and I'll add 2 parameters here. First, the to parameter, which is the number we want to send the message, and the body parameter, which is the text message. Now we're going to use Axios to call the WhatsApp API to send messages. So I'll add await Axios function, and we can configure some properties inside an object. First, we need to configure the URL property, and let me go back to the WhatsApp API setup, and on the example here, this is the URL that we need to call to send messages. So let me copy here and paste on the URL property. Then we need to configure the method property, and here on the example, it's a post method. So here I'll add post. Now we need to set some headers here, which is the authorization passing the word barrier, and the access token we have here on the top. But for security reasons, this token has an expiration time. So let me click here on generate access token again. It will open a dialog to confirm our account. We can click on reconnect. Okay, let me copy this access token. And just like for the webhook verified token constant, let's add this access token on the top as well. So const, and we'll call this WhatsApp underscore access underscore token equals to, and I'll paste the token here. Okay, so back on the send message function, inside the access object, I'll add the headers property. And this is an object with the header we want to configure. So I'll add the authorization equals to, and I'll add backticks here, the barrier, space, and the access token. So I'll add a $sign and curly braces, and inside the WhatsApp access token constant we just created. And we need to set another header, which is the content type equals to application JSON. So back on the Reply tab, I'll add content dash type equals to application slash JSON. Great. So now we need to send the body request inside a data property, and we need to send as an object string. So I'll add JSON dot stringify method with an object inside. So the first property we need to send, let me go back here to the example, is the messaging underscore product property, which is equals to WhatsApp. So here on the code, let's add messaging underscore product equals to WhatsApp. Next, let's check here on the example again. Is the to property with the number we want to send the message. So to property, which is equals to the to parameter we added here on the function. But since the key name is the same as the value name, we can leave just one to here. And then we need to set the type of the message. Here is showing as template, but since the user already started a conversation with our business, so we can send a normal text message in this case. So I'll add the type equals to text, and whatever we added here on the type, for example, besides the text, we could send image, document, template, or others. Then we need to set a property with the same name we added here. Since we added as text, so I'll set the text property, and this is equals to an object. And inside, we need to set the body property, which is the text message, and we can get it from the body parameter here on the function. But again, since the key name is the same as the value name, we can leave just one body here. Great. Now, when we're starting our application, let's send a message to the test number so we can see the status of the message we sent. So inside the app listen callback function here, whenever our app is running, I'll call the send message function. And the to property, let's send to the test number we are receiving the messages. So let me copy here from the from property that we got on the webhook and paste here. Okay, and the second parameter is the message. So I'll add something simple like hello. Okay, now let's restart our app. And let me open WhatsApp here. Okay, here's the hello message we sent. And if we check here on the console tab, note that we received a similar response when receiving a message with the entry array and inside the changes array. And inside the value object, instead of the messages array, we got a statuses array, informing details of the message we sent. So here we have the ID of the message and the status as sent. And if we scroll down, we received another object with the status property as read, because the user already read the message, because we have WhatsApp opened here. Now let me close the index.js tab and the package.json as well. Close the web view and shell tabs and leave just the console tab. Now let me resize the browser here and open the cell phone screen at the same time. Now on the WhatsApp app, let me go back to the main screen. So when we send the message, the user won't read at first sight, just so we can see which status we'll get. So let me restart our app again. Okay, so here's the new message, but we didn't open yet. Now here on the console, we received the sent status, and if we scroll down, we got the delivered status, but we didn't receive the read status yet. Now when we open the message here on WhatsApp, then we receive the read status here on the console. So first we receive the sent status, then the delivered status, and when the user reads the message, we receive the read status. Now let me put this cell phone on plane mode. So we won't receive the messages till we turn the plane mode off. Now let's run our app again. Okay, so we only received the sent status for now. Now here on the cell phone, let me go back to the main screen first and turn the plane mode off. Now let's wait a few seconds for the internet connection to be reestablished. Perfect, we received the message and the new delivered status. Now when we open to read the message, again we got the read status. So first we got the sent status, that means WhatsApp sent the message, but it wasn't delivered because the user was out of internet connection. Once we turned the connection back on, the message was delivered and we got the status as delivered. And last, when the user opens the message and read, we got the read status. Perfect. Now let me resize the browser here to complete the entire screen and open the index.js file. And let me drag the console tab to the right. Okay, so inside the post webhook route, we need to handle if it's a message request or a status request of the message we sent. So first, let's check if the body request we're receiving from WhatsApp has the entry array, and inside if it has the changes array, because the message and the status body requests have these properties. And if it doesn't contain these properties, we should send a response back with a bad request status code and not proceed with the webhook request. So let me get rid of this console log from here. And first, let's grab the entry array property from inside the request body. So I'll add a new constant here and an empty object, which is equals to the request parameter dot body. And we want to extract the entry property from the request body. Now I'll add an if statement, checking if the entry constant is undefined or it doesn't exist. So I'll add an exclamation sign here, the entry property, the OR operator. So if the entry array does exist but it's empty, so entry dot length equals to 0. If so, let's return response dot status, and we're going to use the 400 status code, which means bad request. And let's send a simple message here, so dot send, and something like invalid request. Okay, so if the entry array exists and it has a content, let's check if the changes array exists inside. So I'll create another constant, call changes, equals to the entry constant, and it will always send just one object inside the entry array. So let's get the content here, adding the index as 0, and then the dot changes property. Now we'll add the same validation here we added for the entry constant array. So let me copy this entire if statement here and paste, but I'll change the entry here to changes constant. Same here, because changes is also an array. So if the changes array property doesn't exist inside the entry property, or if it's empty, we're going to send the bad request response as well. Okay, so now we need to grab the statuses array property in case we receive a status update from a message we sent, or the messages array property in case we received a message from a user. So I'll create a new constant, call statuses, equals to the changes constant. And this is also an array with only one item inside. So let's grab the first index and note that the statuses array here is inside a value property, which is an object. So I'll add here dot value and then dot statuses. Now, the statuses property array might be undefined in case we receive a message. In that case, we'll receive a messages array instead. So what we can do here is add a ternary conditional operator, which is a shorthand way to write if-else statement in JavaScript. So I'll add a question mark here. So if the statuses array property exists, let's return the first object from inside the array. So I'll copy this entire condition here and paste. And let's get the 0 index here. And for the else statement, in case the statuses array is undefined, I'll add a column here. And let's return null. Okay, now let's do the same in case we receive a message from a user. So let me copy this entire constant here with the ternary conditional operator. And we'll replace the statuses to messages. And after the value here as well, so messages. And here after the question mark, where we are returning the first index. Okay, now we can add an if statement here and check if the statuses constant is not null. So all messages status we received, we can handle inside here. So I'll add a comment saying handle messages status. Now here on the bottom, I'll add another if statement and check if the messages constant is not null. And all messages we received, we can handle inside this if statement here. So I'll add another comment saying something like handle received messages. So this way is simpler to understand. And let's just write some logs in the statuses if statement here, just so we can visualize what's going on. So I'll add console.log and backticks inside so we can break in multiple lines. And inside I'll add something like message, status, update. And let's show the ID of the message here. So I'll add ID equals to $sign and curly braces. And let's call the statuses constant dot ID. Let's also print the status property here. So status, $sign, curly braces, and inside the statuses constant dot status. Okay, and here inside the messages if statement, let's print the entire messages object for now. So I'll add console.log and let me convert this object to a string by adding JSON.stringify method, and inside the messages constant null for the second parameter, and 2 for the space parameter. Great, let me resize the console tab here. And let's run our example again. And the user should receive a hello message because we're calling the send message function here. Okay, the user received the hello message and we got on the console 2 status update here to the same message, the send status and the read status, because the user already read the message. Now, if the user send a message, so let me type here testing and send. Great, here's the message object containing all the information we need to handle this message. Okay, so note that there is a type here as text. So the user can send different types of messages like image, document, a sticker, and others, and it will send a property with the key as the same name as the type. So here the type is text and we received a text property. If it was an image, we would receive the image property. Same for other types. So we need to handle this message correctly according to the type inside the post webhook route. So let's add an if statement here to check the message type. So if the messages constant dot type equals to text. So here we can use some AI library to understand what the user is sending. Maybe the user wants to check details of its account or check some document, business hours. Maybe it's a question, any kind of message that the user is sending, and we need to proceed to send the correct response. I'll just add a simple example just so you can understand. Let's say if the user sends hello, we should send hello back. So I'll add another if statement here. And let's check if the message the user is sending is equals to hello. So let's grab the text property and inside the body property, which is the message. So messages dot text dot body equals to hello, and let's add a dot to lowercase method here, so the user can send hello in capital H or all in uppercase, it won't matter. So let's respond back saying hello as well. So I'll call the send message function, and the true parameter we can get from the from property. So I'll add messages dot from, and for the body parameter, which is the message, we can send hello, how are you? Okay, and before we test, let me remove this send message function from here so we don't send a message when we run the application. Okay, let's run again. So nothing happened yet, and let me clear the user messages here just so we have a clear screen. Now, if the user sent hello, perfect, we're sending back hello, how are you? And here we can see all details on the console, the message the user sent, and the status of the message we sent. Great! Now, if we actually want to send as a reply to this hello message, something like this, when we click on top of the message and hold, and then click on reply button, and send a reply message. So, hello, how are you? Note here on the console that we got a new message, like if the user sent a message to us. And note that it sent a context object with the from property and the message ID property. So if we want to send a reply message, we need to send a context object with the message ID that we're replying. In this case, it's this ID here. Note that it's the same ID when we receive the message. So back on the code. Let's create another function very similar to the send message function, but we'll add the context property inside the data here, and the message ID that we want to reply as a third parameter. So let me copy the entire send message function and paste, and let's change the name to reply message. We'll keep the to and the body parameters, and let's add the message ID parameter here. And inside the data object, below the text property, let's add the context property, which is equals to an object. And here we need to set the message underscore ID property, which is equals to the message ID parameter. Okay, now inside the webhook route, if the user sends hello, instead of calling the send message function, let's call the reply message function, and on the third parameter here, let's add the messages constant dot ID, which is right here. Okay, let's run again. Great, let me open the console tab. Now, if the user sent hello, great, we send a reply to the hello message. And of course, if the user sent another message, something like I'm good and you, we would need to handle that message. So this is a good example to build a chatbot using NLP, natural language processing library like OpenAI, GPT model, Dialogflow, and others. I just did a simple example so you can understand, but today we basically can build almost anything we want. And I'm handling everything inside the webhook post route, but in a real application, it's a good practice to break these into different functions, like handle received text messages, handle received image messages, handle message status updates, so you can have a cleaner code, but I'll keep adding everything inside the webhook post route, since this is just for learning purposes. Now, there are other kinds of messages we can send, like buttons or lists, so the user can choose from predefined options, making the interaction more interactive and streamlined. This helps guide the conversation, reduce confusion, and improve user experience by offering quick and easy ways to respond. These type of messages are called interactive. So let's check on the docs how these interactive messages looks like and how to use it. So here on the developers Facebook platform, on the API setup page, let's scroll to the step number 4 and click on See Documentation. I'll open this on a new tab. And this is the Cloud API documentation, which is the one we're using. And we can click on the messages options here on the left. And then we can select interactive lists. And it looks like this with a header, a text message, and a footer. The header and the footer are optional, but the text message here in the middle is required. And then there's this button text here that when the user clicks, it shows a list of options that we can configure. And note that we can separate these by sections. And when the user selects an option from the list, it replies with the option the user chose. And if we scroll down here, it shows what we need to send on the request body and all the parameters we can send, showing which are required and which are optional. Here's a complete request example, and then the example response. And this is what we need, the webhook that is going to send to our backend when the user selects an option so we can handle. Note that inside the message object, which we are already handling, but the type now is equals to interactive, so it will send an interactive object property which sends details of the option the user selected. And each option we add on the list, we need to add an ID as well, which is unique so we can identify on the backend. And we can also send interactive reply buttons, which instead of a list, it sends buttons as options directly inside the message. So we can also send a header, which is optional, and in these examples, it shows an image as a header, but we can also send a text. The text message, which is required, the footer, which is optional, and the reply buttons. And we can set up to 3 buttons max. So if we scroll down, here's the parameters we can send: example request, example response, and the webhook. So this is also type interactive. And inside the interactive object, we can see the details of the reply button the user selected. And both the interactive lists and interactive reply buttons will send the context object so we can identify which list or reply button message the user is responding to. Because we might send the same list or reply buttons so we know which one the user selected to respond. So let's send both these types of interactive messages so we can see how to handle them inside our app. So back on the code, let me copy the send message function and paste below the send reply function. And let me change the name here to send list. And we'll only have the 2 parameter, so we can remove this body parameter from here. Okay, so first thing we need to do is change the type property here from text to interactive. So now instead of the text property, we need to add the interactive property. And the body property, we can leave it because it's required for lists, but now it's equals to an object. And inside, we'll add the text property. So this will be the text message above the list button. So I'll add something like this is a interactive list message. And since we can add the reply button message as interactive as well, so we need to tell if this interactive object is a list or a reply button message. So above the body property, we need to set the type property. So if it's a list, we can add the list type. And if it's a reply button message, we can add as button. But we'll see this option in a few minutes. Now we'll configure the button label that the user will click to see the options and the actual options after that. So we need to set a property called action, and this is equals to an object. So the first property we'll set is the button, which is the label of the button. So I'll add something like tap to see the options, for example. And now we'll set the options inside a property called sections, which is equals to an array of objects. So we can break the list into different sections containing a title and the items. For this first example, let's add just one section and then we'll break into different sections. So inside here, I'll add the title property, which is required, but we can send as a blank text that WhatsApp will handle as if we don't have a title for this section. But we need to send this property anyway. So let's send options without a title for now. And next we need to set the rows property, which is also an array of objects. And each object we add here is the option. So we need to configure an ID property for each option. And this is a string. So for this first option, I'll just add something like first underscore option. Of course, the name is up to you. And then we can set the title property, which is a string. So for this first option, I'll add something like first option, for example. And we can also add a description property, which is optional. So I'll just add something like this is the description of the first option. Okay, let me resize here. Now let me copy this entire object and I'll add a comma here and paste. Now for the second option, I'll change the ID to second option and the title to second option as well. And the description to this is the description for the second option. Great. Now let's add one more object here. So I'll paste again. And the ID is third option. And the title, third option as well. And the description, for this one, I'll remove it just so we can see how it looks. Great. So let's call this function here on the post webhook route if the user send a message equals to list, for example. So inside this if statement, checking if the type is text, I'll copy this if statement, checking if the message is hello, and I'll paste below here. But now we'll check if the user is sending a message equals to list, for example. If so, instead of calling the reply message function, we'll call the send list function. And the first and only parameter we need to send is the to parameter, which we can get it from the messages constant dot from property. Okay, so let's test all this. Let me restart our app. Now here on WhatsApp, if the user send list, okay, so it's taking a little longer. Something happened. Let's check on the console tab. Oh, okay, so it says that the button label is too long, max length is 20. So here on the button property, we need to send another label here. So I'll just change it to tab for the options, which I think is less than 20 characters. So let's test again, restart our app. And here on WhatsApp, if the user sends list again, great, here's the interactive list message with the body and the button tab for the options, just like we configure on the code. And when the user clicks on this button, it shows the options we added. First, second, and third options. And the third option doesn't have the description, and the title up here is the same we added on the button label. Okay, so let's select the second option, for example, and click on send. Okay, now let's check the console. Great, so first we have here the message that the user sent, which is list, and then the statuses of the interactive list we sent, and it has sent and read status, and then the option that the user selected. And here we can see that the context ID is the same as the interactive list message we sent up here. And then the option details that the user selected inside this list reply option, the ID, title, and description. So now inside the post webhook route, let's add another if statement, checking if the message type is equals to interactive, so we can handle the list response. So below here, I'll add another if statement, and I'll check if the messages dot type is equals to interactive. And inside we need to check the type here inside the interactive object, if it's a list reply or a button reply type, because the button reply will send a similar response, but the type will be button reply. So inside this if statement, let's check the type property inside the interactive object. So if messages dot interactive dot type equals to list underscore reply. Just like here. And inside here, we can handle the way we want it, the option that the user selected. We might need to add more if statements to check the option ID or add into a separate function passing the ID as a parameter. So we can handle and maybe send a PDF document, another interactive list, a simple message. We can do anything we want here. For this example, we'll just send a message back to the user with the ID and title of the option the user selected. So I'll call the send message function. And just one note here, we can add an await here in the beginning since these functions are returning a promise. In that case, we need to add async here before the route function. That way, we're going to wait for this function to be executed and then it will send the response back to the client or maybe execute another function. So it's up to you how you want to handle this. Here we're not waiting for the function to be executed to proceed. We'll receive the response later when the function sends a result for us. So let me remove this await from here. But we can leave the async on the route here that we won't have any problems. So inside the send message function, for the to parameter, let's call the messages object.from property. And for the body, I'll add backticks here. And we can send something like you selected the option with ID. So $sign and curly braces. Now to grab the ID here from the response, we can call messages dot interactive dot list underscore reply dot ID. And continuing here, I'll add a dash title equals to, let me copy this entire code here and paste, but I'll replace the ID to title. Okay, let's test. So I'll restart the app here. Okay, now if the user sends list again. Okay, so here's the list. Now let's see the options. And now I'll choose the first option here and click on send. Great, now we're sending a message back saying you selected the message with ID first option and the title first option. Perfect. Now for the list here, we can add a few other properties inside the request body. So for example, let's send a header and the footer. So above the body property, I'll set the header property, which is equals to an object. And we can send a document as a header or an image. But for our example, let's just send a simple text. So inside we can set the type property equals to text. And then we need to set the text property. And let's send something simple like message, header, for example. And below the body property, we can set the footer property, which is also equals to an object. And inside, just like for the body property, we can set the text property. And here I'll add something simple as well, like this is the message footer. Great. Now inside the sections array here, let's break the options into different sections and let's add a title for each section. So for this first title here, let's add something like first section, for example. And let me cut this third option from here because we'll add into a different section. So after the first section object here, I'll add another object and we can add the title property equals to second section. Then we can add the rows property, which is also an array. And inside, let's paste the third option we cut from before. Okay, we could add other sections and other rows inside each section, but let's leave it like this so we can see how it looks like. Okay, let me restart our app. Great. Now if the user sends list again, okay, here's the interactive list message, now with a header saying message header and a footer saying this is the message footer, and the message body in between. And for the options, now we have separated into two sections. The first section here containing the first and second options, and the second section containing just the third option without the description. So let's select the third option this time and click on send. Great, here's the message we're sending back showing the ID and the title of the option the user selected. Perfect. Now besides the interactive list, let's implement the interactive reply buttons message, which is another way to interact with the user with fewer options in case the user needs a quick response from our application. So let me copy the entire sendList function, which sends the interactive list message we just tested, and it's similar to the interactive reply buttons request. And paste. And let me change the name of the function to send reply buttons instead. And inside the data object property, the type is also interactive, but we need to change the type here to button instead of list. And we can also send a header and a footer, which is optional, but the body is required. So let's keep all these properties here, but let's change the body text here to this is a interactive reply buttons message. And the interactive reply buttons also have the action property, which is required, but the data inside is different. So let me remove everything from inside the object. Okay, and here we'll add the buttons property, which is equals to an array of objects, and each object is a button that will appear on the message. Remember that we can send a maximum of 3 buttons. So let's configure our first button here, and we need to add the type property, which is required. Until today, the only option accepted here is the reply option. So in all buttons, we need to send this property like this. And since we set the type as reply, so we need to add a reply property here, which is equals to an object. And inside, we need to configure the ID of the button, which is a string, so we can identify inside the post webhook route which button was selected by the user. So I'll just add something like first underscore button. And we'll also need the title property, which is the label of the button. And I'll just add first button, for example. Okay, let's add another button. So let me copy this entire object here, add a comma and paste. And I'll change the ID here to second button, for example, and the title property to second button as well. Okay, so we could add one more button here, but let's leave it like this. So now what we can do is if the user sends a message saying buttons, for example, we can call the send reply buttons function we just created to send the interactive reply buttons message. So inside the post webhook route, let me copy this if statement here, checking if the user sent a message equals to list, because we're gonna do something similar for the reply buttons. And let me paste. And instead of checking for the list message, let's check for the buttons message, for example. And inside, instead of calling the send list function, let's call the send reply buttons function, which also has the to parameter, so we can leave it like this. Okay, let's test this to see what we'll receive on the webhook. Let me restart our app. So now here on WhatsApp, if the user sends the buttons message, perfect. Here's the interactive reply buttons message with the header, the body, and the footer. And of course, the 2 buttons we added. And let's click on the first button here to see what we will receive on the webhook route. Okay, note that it replied the message with the title of the button the user selected. And here on the console, inside the message property, we receive the context object, and note that the ID is the same of the message we sent. And we received similar details from the interactive list request the type as interactive as well, and inside the interactive object, the type button reply, and then inside the button reply object, we got the ID and title of the button the user selected. So inside the post webhook route, we can handle the same way we're handling the interactive list request. So here we're checking if the request body type is interactive, and now we need to check if the interactive type is equals to button underscore reply, just like here, instead of the list reply. So let me copy this entire if statement here and paste. And instead of checking for the list reply, let's check if it's equals to button reply. If so, let's send a similar message to the user. Of course, in a real application, you might need to do something here depending on which button the user selected. So we might need to add other if statements to check for the ID property. Here we're just building something simple so you can understand how this works. So we're just sending a simple message back to the user, showing the option the user selected. So let me change the message here to you select the button with ID, and here inside the $, curly braces, let's replace the list reply property here to button reply, and replace here for the title as well. Button reply. Same properties from the object here. Okay, so let's test all this. Let me restart our app and let me resize here. So if the user sends buttons again. Okay, here's the interactive reply button message. Now let's click on the second button. Perfect, here's the message. You select the button with ID second button and the title second button. Great. So we learned in this video how to receive and handle messages sent to our business WhatsApp number using webhooks with Node.js and Access. We also learned how to send a simple text message, reply a text message sent from the user, and send interactive messages such as lists and reply buttons to interact with our users effectively. We learned what is a webhook, how WhatsApp API webhook works, and how to test webhooks using a cloud environment. In our case, we used the Replit online IDE, which made it easier for us to test without deploying our application to a cloud server. I'll leave the GitHub repo link for this example on the description below. Hope this video was helpful to you, and if it was, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you on the next video.